Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to you here on a seasonably warm day in Brussels. We've laid on a bit of a temperature for us today, but I hope everyone will be cool and calm and collected in here because we are going to go through an awful lot today, from coordination to collaboration, 5 years of the ICR Facility. My name is Jennifer Baker. I'm a Brussels-based reporter and presenter, and I will be your MC or your moderator today, asking the questions, but of course, it's really all down to you to have all the answers. Now, I'm sure everyone here knows that the ICR facility was started in September 2019, but as a recap, it kicked off as a multi-partner project to support the improvement of regulations and policies that support conducive business and investment climate in African, Caribbean and Pacific countries. So now, after about 5.5 years of successful implementation, the ICR facility in its current format will wrap up in August, and we will see a new phase coming in then for the next 4 years, the Global Gateway Corridors. That will kick off in September 2025. So today we're going to reflect on successes and good practices, how the ICR facility team and the management unit adapted over time and changed over the course of 5 years, particularly during COVID-19 in 2020, what that meant, how it evolved from a coordinated multi-partner project into a fully integrated team based on interagency collaboration and what that translates into in terms of day-to-day practices and activities. And we're doing all of that because we want to look at how those good practices can serve as examples for replication for the Global Gateway Facility, but also for other Team Europe initiatives. Now, we have our agenda up there as well. You can have a look. We will have a mix of presentations and panels. Then after lunch, we are going to go into a really interactive format. You will be moving around in different teams, and we hope that will be really involving and insightful for you. You can see after lunch, again, we will have a tea break. We want a group photograph. I'll remind you about that at the time. It will be an opportunity for Q&A with everyone. We will have microphones in the audience, and then a closing panel, and everyone's favorite part of the day, the networking cocktail at the end, where we can do a debrief. So with that, I'm going to open our opening panel. So I'm going to invite to the stage my speakers. We're going to look at how we've changed over the last 5 years and get the input from our experts. So Miguel Campo-Lopez is from DG INPA in the European Commission. Miguel, grab a seat. Anthony Brand is a MSMEs expert from the Organization of African, Caribbean and Pacific States. If I can get you to say, Anthony, just, yeah, we'll go along the line. Christoph Jurek is Head of Global Partnerships for Development at the British Council. Alexandra Opperman is Team Leader at the ICR Facility and GIZ. Alina Hofrichter is Project Officer from the Department for Sustainable and Inclusive Economy at Expertise France. And Annemieke Beekmans is Director for Technical Expertise, SNV. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, so much. That was quite a mouthful of very impressive titles, so I know that you're bringing a great deal of insight to our discussion. There are handheld mics in between you, so we'll go around a first round, and then if we've time, we'll maybe get to some additional questions. But Miguel, I know you just landed in Brussels today from a mission in Africa. I've heard you described as the founding father of the ICR facility in 2019. So you've been around behind the scenes and in front of us here as well. Tell us what was the initial inspiration and what were the objectives in bringing together 4 implementing partners to work on the business environments.
Thank you very much, and hello to everyone, and welcome to this nice event. As you rightly say, I consider myself the mother, the father, or the uncle, doesn't really matter, but clearly one person that was really behind. But it was not only me, of course. It was a team effort with the ACP, with the member states, and with a lot of people who participated. But what was behind it? So, in reality, yes, the contract was signed in 2019, but the idea began in 2018. And it was the result of a situation where the Commission, at least, was shifting from a view of looking at the private sector from an external perspective, like an external actor who was part of the process of economic growth, but was not at the center or important for the development process, to a moment where the Commission started looking at the private sector as another key player that needed to be involved if we wanted to reach the SDGs. But this started more or less in 2015, 2016. So by 2017, we were trying to engage more and more with our delegations, with our colleagues, and seeing how we could be more effective in reaching out to the private sector. And there was a lot of challenges because in the culture of the Commission and in the culture of development cooperation, that was not really embedded. And a lot of people really didn't understand how to do this and didn't understand how to engage. So we started creating in the unit where I was then, which was the unit of private sector development, a number of tools to support both the delegations, but also to work with local private sector and local governments to push a bit the agenda of how to work more and more actively with the private sector. And ICR is the result of that exercise. So we built first, even before I joined the Commission, a tool that is still existing that is called TPSD, and we have some colleagues there, over there, who was the first tool that we had. But then we realized TPSD was a service contract that was doing an excellent job in supporting the Commission, but we realized that we needed also to work more closely with the member states. And for those who are connected to the EU jargon and EU world, you've heard about Team Europe. I said, and I still think, that the embryo of Team Europe was actually ICR. Because it was there even before no one spoke about Team Europe, even before COVID came. And it was this idea of bringing together the capacity, the political capital, the technical knowledge of the European actors together towards a common goal. And that's how ICR was built. And it was a process that already from the very beginning, it was a collective, and another word that we use a lot in the Commission, which I have to say I don't like, not because I don't like the concept, but when a word is overused, I start disliking it, and which is co-creation, so co-creation was done, and it was a collective effort from day one. And to be honest, by the time I started building ICR, I had been in the Commission for a year and a half, and I thought it was quite normal. But over time, I realized that ICR was kind of an experiment, that it was not that common in the Commission, because as a result of ICR, it's not only the impact that we had together with ACP and the member states on the countries, it's also that after that, dozens of colleagues have come to me to understand how we built this and how we made it work and how we were so efficient. And they copy more or less in different versions a similar ICR over time, which is now a very popular product, let's say, this kind of consortium. But I think it was innovative of bringing together the member states. It was innovative on how we built it and the governance. It was innovative in how we involve external partners like ACP fully in the process. And I think it was successful. And I'll stop here because if you don't cut me, I can talk about ICR for 2 hours.
Okay, well, we won't take up 2 hours of your time, but I'm sure we'll come back to you later on. Anthony, I mean, in effect, you're representing the 79 partner countries that involved. That's quite a job to represent 79 countries over 5 years. But the project has been built jointly, not to say co-creation, Miguel, we'll try and avoid that word, but collaboration and cooperation. Can you elaborate on the Organization of African, Caribbean and Pacific States vision for the development of the ICR facility and how it has evolved over the course of the 5.5 years from your perspective?
Thank you, Jennifer, and it's such a pleasure to see so many of the persons that I've worked with over the past 3.5, 5 years on this project. So the Organization of African, Caribbean, Pacific States has existed for 50 years, and the organization exists to support the economic, social, political, human development of our 79 members across the Africa, Caribbean, and Pacific regions. As Miguel mentioned, in terms of this program, it was a co-collaboration, a co-development, and really what impresses me about the ICR facility is that it meets or it satisfies the 4 pillars of the OACPS private sector development program perfectly. So these pillars include access to finance, particularly for women and youth, financial inclusion, business and environment reform, as well as knowledge management. And I think that the ICR facility has excelled on all these points. In terms of our vision for the implementation, it's important to note that at the time that the program was implemented, started around September 2019, the OACPS had a call for proposals whereby many different private sector development bodies from our 79 members had submitted project proposals to the ACP, to Business ACP, which was supporting the implementation and has been supporting the implementation of the private sector development framework for the past 8 years, 7-8 years. And the ICR facility was able to actually satisfy this demand. So it's very important to note that the program was demand-driven so that where countries had a project which they wanted to be implemented to help improve their private sector development or actors, they were able to come to the ICR facility.
Well, thank you. So that's the OACPS side. Christophe, the British Council is both a donor and an implementer. So in your view, tell us what were the key milestones, take us through what you saw changing or what you saw as key from the inception in 2019 to today, and also whether any of those developments surprised you or is there anything that stood out?
Okay, well, first of all, hello everybody. It's very nice to see all these colleagues, partners and friends. For the sake of simplicity, I will be calling the British Council the Bridging Council today because you hear a lot about member states. So I'm just quoting Marietta Jäger, Deputy Director General, calling us Bridging Council. And there's a reason for it. It's because we're trying to bridge, if you want, between what we have to offer and for the common good in terms of the mission statement of the British Council, which is basically to support peaceful and prosperous societies around the world. So as regards that prosperity agenda, our, I would say, involvement in the organic development of the ICR is actually through the Practitioners Network. And within the Practitioners Network, for those who don't know about it, it's basically a network of all the development implementation agency of Europe who congregate around, if you want, common topics to engage with the EU and others to see how, support aid effectiveness and basically be able to contribute to design and shaping, if you want, best implementation modalities. And within that, there was, or there still is, a private sector working group. And that's where, through that, we started discussing with some of the partners here, what would really make sense in terms of our contribution, if you want, to this agenda. It comes back to what Miguel was saying. That was really a driver for that working group to start with. Now, we are a contributor to the budget, albeit small. We did have, I would say, a very particular interest in supporting an area which we really believed had a potential at the time, at the start, which was social enterprise, as you probably remember. And that social enterprise dimension to private sector development is really linked to what I think has been part of the real success and the evolution of the program, which is what is also the social impact of private sector development. And you were talking about being demand-driven, and exactly through that, I think what we could see is that, we were not looking at just a unilateral, kind of very static approach to private sector development, but really kind of the dynamics around it and how it supports, if you want, a positive, outcome for societies. So that was kind of the beginning, and I think the facility, and you're absolutely right, Miguel, I think that, we've heard about facilities before. A lot of them were lukewarm in terms of reception or even of impact, but this particular model was really very interesting because, and I think the program in itself showcases that evolution, which was, it really adapted, if you want, to demand as you go along. And that's the reason why the ICR itself has kind of prioritized really areas where traction was really there. So it really was a great collaboration, both in terms of policy dialogue with the counterparts of the EU, OACPS, etc., but also on the implementation side, really being very close to, if you want, the demand and understanding those dynamics. And I think that was kind of part of the success story of this facility, because that really worked in tandem very well.
Thank you. Alexandra, so after 3 years of implementation, it was 2022, the ICR facility donors asked for this women's economic empowerment element to become a significant objective of the project, so that it had to be integrated into all activities as a baseline. Now that's not easy to create that gender-sensitive approach to all sorts of development projects. Tell us about how that happened, how did it impact the project, and what were the key lessons learned?
Yeah, okay. First of all, thanks everyone for coming, and hopefully we're going to have a nice day. And yes, I would love to answer that question because I think that's one that is very dear to my heart also. Maybe I can start with saying that it was one of the donors, also the Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, that had has a very strong focus on women's economic, had placed a very strong focus on women's economic and development. By the way, thanks for joining us, Elena, from the permanent representation. Can't see you. Ah, there she is. Yeah. Yeah, so I think that at first maybe you would react like, okay, it's the ICR facility is focusing on investment climate reform. So what's the angle towards women's economic empowerment or gender equality? And I think that's the beauty of the whole thing, because a lot of times when we work on gender topics, we work in isolation as a development cooperation. And with the ICR facility, we worked on a very core topic of development, which is the investment climate. And we had the opportunity via this new focus on women's economic empowerment to not only preach to the choir, but also go beyond that choir and have the possibility to talk to people about women's economic empowerment that might not have it very high up on their agenda most of the times. So meaning ministries of finance, for example, Ministry of Economy, Ministry of Labor, all these, or also business associations or development banks. I mean, it's for them, gender is a specific angle that we feel sometimes is a little bit underestimated. And why do I say underestimated? Because I think what the ICR facility also managed to do is point out the economic benefits of women's economic empowerment. It's, of course, there are various motives why it makes sense to promote women's economic empowerment and gender equality, but it also makes sense. It's economic sense. So this is what I think going via a facility like the ICR facility, focusing on business environment reforms, is a very nice way of also pushing not only the usual suspects towards this topic. And I might say that we did achieve quite a lot in that area. And it also was very helpful to have this flexibility as a facility, because the ICR facility, we can work with various stakeholders, and that's also one of the key topics right from the beginning, was always public-private dialogue, getting the private sector and the public sector together. And if you want to achieve some things in the area of women's economic empowerment, you need all people on board. So unfortunately, our colleague Irene is not here. She has been working on a project in Malawi where for the British Council, that was implemented by British Council. And it's a good example on how ICR facility was able to bring together a lot of different people, because we worked together with the Ministry of Labor, but also with the Ministry of Gender and with Business Association, and all together trying to look at, okay, so what's the situation when it comes to gender-based violence in companies? And just this whole conversation is one that I think you can't have enough of those conversations to make people aware of it, and also make people aware of it that it's an economic factor. So I think that all in all, adding the women's economic empowerment topic to the ICR facility also brought a bit of additional profile to the ICR facility, and I think that I can speak for the team that and say that it's a topic that grew very dear to our hearts, and we are also looking forward to continuing working on the topic. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Alexandra. And you mentioned flexibility. I'm sure that's a word that will come up again throughout the day. Alina, so you've been responsible for the ICR facility at Expertise France for the past years and have seen and followed the facility's evolution and achievements. So how did your organization tackle the challenges of this interagency collaboration? And according to you, what are the good practices that we could replicate in other projects?
Thank you very much, and also good morning from my side. I think there have been already a lot of points mentioned here, but I would like to focus also on the beginning of the project development. So what is really a really important basis for this project is that there's a shared vision and a shared approach between the different implementing partners, but also together with the European Union, that has been established since the beginning, during the development, and throughout the whole project implementation, which has been really crucial for the success of this project. So I would say that is really important, especially at the beginning of project development, to discuss and to be open for negotiations, and also to find compromises, of course. And I think one crucial point how this also worked out very well is that the member state agencies, they put a little bit aside their own interest and their own focus, and really put a lot of trust into their focal points who developed this project, and who then develop this project more on an interperson level, and less on an interagency level, if I can say so. And this helped also to have a quite operational approach, so to have a project that is fitting to implementation modes of people who are then putting it into place. And third important point, and I think that's also something we already heard a little bit and that you can also see today as we are all here together, is that there's a really good relationship between the different implementation agencies and also with the European Union. A lot of trust, a lot of open communication. And also, once again, there is this spirit of this facility. There is not an agency up front anymore, but there is the ICR Facility who stands for itself. And this is also achieved through communication inside of the team, so throughout team meetings, team building events, but also vis-à-vis partners, vis-à-vis the EU delegations, that the whole team really represents this facility. And I think that is really, really important.
Anthony, I see you nodding along with a lot of what's being said. I will come back to you. But first, of course, we want to hear from Annemieke. You've heard from the other panelists, so I know a lot has already been said, but in your view, how can these multi-partner projects capitalize on their members' strengths and their resources and really enhance efficiency in delivering technical assistance?
Thank you. And to give this answer, because I've been involved quite from a distance with this initiative, we had quite some internal discussions. So what did we take from this when we talk about efficiency? And it came back also to what you said, the start of the facility, when a lot of time, and I don't know if that was done explicit or that it emerged, but a lot of time and effort was put on the collaborating together. An operational management committee was established, which at the beginning had quite a lot of time and investment and involvement, and gradually became less because it was less needed. So I feel the investment up front in finding ways to collaborate together face to face and at a distance, because COVID came and we all had to change our ways of operating. And especially for an initiative when you start working with partners, and we are a practitioners organization, we started to work with partners that in other consortia we are not working on a regular basis. If you don't do that well, it can contribute to negative efficiency later on. So we feel that what helped to build efficiency in the team was to invest upfront in working together.
Miguel, so let me come back to you. You've moved to a different department at DG INPA, but you were saying that your colleagues are coming up to you and asking you for advice, and you're a model product, quote unquote. So what are the key lessons that you're taking with you to the new projects? What are your colleagues wanting to get from your brain?
Well, if I'm totally honest, the first thing I have to say is that I've tried to replicate ICR and I have not been successful.
Okay.
So that's the first honest answer. And the issue here is that we were able to achieve something that I still don't know how we did it. And I guess the answer is probably people, more than anything else, which is an instrument that had a clear structure, organizational setting with clear objectives, with clear engagement formula with ACP, with the implementing partners and so on. And at the same time, extremely flexible through day one, because we have to remember that yes, we signed in November, but in March we were all sent home for COVID. And right there and then, ICR rethought the whole thing and started thinking, okay, how do we do this in a new context? And it didn't stop. Basically, from day one, they started implementing with complexities, with difficulties, of course, but also Marike there suffered a lot, the knowledge agenda, and how throughout the whole process we've been shifting constantly the approach to improve, to make it better, and everything with honest, at least that I know, maybe on the background it was different, but with very, very little tension, with a very natural formula. And like Alexander was saying, the discussion about how did we move to the women economic empowerment in a very natural way. We just suddenly start discussing and we were all in agreement, and suddenly we shifted and we started working in that, because the relation with the ACP Secretariat, the relation between us was so natural that it could really, really make this happen without being very strict, rigid structures or formulas, just by an open dialogue. Now, I've tried to do this in other programs. We have here another program that has a similar formula, and it also works. But ICR had something, and I have to say that, sorry, but I cannot avoid it. Stephanie Kahn, who was the first team leader of ICR, I think also played a fundamental role in this exercise. From my perspective, she exercised a leadership that set the basis for the future of the facility, and I think that also helped a lot in all this process. So what I try to explain to everyone when they ask for advice is, yes, this is the formula, but the most important thing is that from day one, you engage in a conversation, you listen to your partners, you try to build something together, and you create trust. Because for me, that's the only way to then make it work beyond what we write on the paper.
Well, I'm not surprised, because that sort of secret sauce does not come along every day. And we all had to go through the transition with COVID. It was, it was something that many of the colleagues in the different EU institutions and around the world had to do. And mostly they talk about challenges. They rarely talk about so quickly moving to the benefits. And of course, there were some positive benefits that we take away from even the horrible situation of the pandemic. And one of them, Anthony, I think probably was trust. And I noticed that's what you were nodding to Alina about, and the importance of people. But how does that translate into impact in the business environment, and specifically in OACPS states? And yeah, tell me a bit more about what you see as how we've gone from this trust and people-focused group to actual real results and changes.
Thank you, Jennifer. So indeed, trust was very important in implementing this project. And it's something which we ourselves at the ACP had to learn as well, because if I give you a joke, at the beginning, we would get all these demand requests for projects which would have been evaluated by the team of Diego, for example, and then they would submit them to us, and then we would also evaluate them to make sure that they're in line with our objectives. And I'm so glad that we stopped that, because we just received too many. We received like a lot of requests, and like they always met with the objectives. So we had to like also learn internally to actually like trust the implementation unit to do their job, which we did. And I think the results speak for themselves. So we also had to go through a learning process as the, let's say, program funders. Then you were speaking about how that relates to actually impact on the ground. So I think what we have seen is through the different interventions which have been done, not only those which we received from the demand side, but also those related to output to the development of the development finance institutions, and also the knowledge management sharing, that we see that the impact has been that we have to ensure that as much as possible, we ensure that there are synergies. So for instance, we've seen, for example, when there was the regional event, which was held in Rwanda in June of last year. Actually, it was June last year that the regional event in Rwanda was held. What was great about that is that we actually were able to ensure that, or to have the facility, the ICR facility invited some of the women entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs, from other programs, from the ACP EU Development Minerals Program, to attend that as well. So I think that was a very good example of how we ensured that the lessons being learned from the ICR facility were actually being shared across the regions. Additionally, if I think of another program which we had in Sierra Leone, which was looking at the informal economy, we have another program looking at the informal economy, and then we have received a request to also look at formalization in Sierra Leone as well. And at first we wondered, well, what's the difference going to be, between the two different programs? But we worked with the team of Diego, and they were able to like clearly work with the Ministry of Trade in Sierra Leone, identify how the ICR facility would expand upon the work that had already been done in formalization in this country. And the results also speak for themselves in terms of the development of a formalization plan. So we are very thankful to the ICR facility for this approach.
I'm going to jump around a bit for the last part, so feel free, any of the panelists, to jump in. Alina, let me come to you. I mean, Miguel, so if there were no challenges if you listened to him intently, but there must have been a few challenges that you've had to overcome along the way. I'm interested to know what might they be, but equally, what are you most proud of?
Yeah, challenges. I mean, I think we heard already some of them. COVID, of course, hit, but as Annemie already said, we had. I think what was also our strength here was that it's already a regional project. So, and also the team hasn't been on the same place. So there has been some in Paris, in Brussels, in Bonn. You haven't been in Colombia yet, right? But yeah, I mean, we have been spread over the world a little bit. So I think COVID has been a challenge, but also kind of a strength afterwards, because that led us to a more remote work and also working more with national consultants that has been also maintained after COVID. So I think that is something where we maybe took a situation that it was challenging into a really positive outcome. And on the second point of your question in regards of what we are the most proud of, I mean, it's difficult to say, but I think it's maybe a bit a repetition, but I think this interagency collaboration is really what is the biggest strength of this project, and something that we will also continue. As you already heard, we will have the next project starting soon. On a bit more global gateway focus, but here as well, we really developed this project in a collaborative way. We continued this great coordination between the different agencies, and of course, we are building this project on the basis of the ICR facility and what has worked well so far. So I think that's also a nice continuation of efforts from the last years.
Christoph, same question to you. What are you most proud of? But then, how do you replicate that? Because technical replication is one thing, but it's very hard to replicate this feeling or this, sort of intangible benefits that you seem to have built up here.
I'm gonna refer back to your recipe, or the magic recipe, or what are the ingredients. I mean, and therefore, like Miguel said, it's not easy to replicate, except if you've got some of those foundational, elements. But first and foremost, I wanted to say, I think it was the right stuff at the right time. I think all of us, we felt like pioneers. And when you are a pioneer in a particular area, you really feel the need to collaborate, because you really are part of that community of purpose, right? So you really feel that you have a mission. And I think that was the driver, if you want, originally. And organically, indeed, we moved into women economic empowerment, but that's because of that right stuff at the right time. That traction was there, and the ICR was able, we're talking about pivot in relation to COVID, but also pivot in relation to that traction where you felt that really has, if you want, potential. And I would say, to come back to the Rwanda event, I mean, I've been to many events. That one was outstanding, absolutely. And you could see that traction was evidenced, if you want, with the participation, with the engagement, and how you can see that there is a ripple effect to what we've tried to initiate. The second thing, in terms of the magical recipe, I'm a bit on both sides, both, if you want, in terms of kind of the donor and then on the implementation. So again, I have been to gazillion steering committees in my life. But I can tell you, this was the easiest steering committee sessions I've ever had. And the reason is simple, is that, again, we knew what we were all collectively after, and the communication between the teams and the steering committee was also outstanding. So therefore, when we went there, we were just saying, well, actually, we're only here to kind of smile at each other and say yes to everything. Because it really was, that dynamic was really there. So, we can't replicate that on everything, but I would say that as a starting point, you need to really factor in that really mission-critical purpose of your engagement. Really do the right stuff at the right time. I'm just repeating myself. So I think I'm particularly proud of the fact that, women economic empowerment is an extremely important topic. I think that we approached it in a very efficient way, given what we had to work with as part of the facility. And it really built that traction that, enables to continue in that domain. So from a British Council point of view, I mean, women empowerment in all shapes and forms is absolutely at the core of what we want to kind of pursue anyway. So that really gave that window and that visibility, which I've heard others also saying, that works. You know, it's not a, it's a challenge, but it really works, and you can demonstrate that impact, and that was really useful.
Well, just as a follow-up, I mean, as you say, I mean, it sounds like things went very smoothly, but I mean, resources or financing is not infinite of all places. So presumably there is a need to prioritize. And how did you do that as a group with so many different partners? Yep. And then to whoever wants to answer, grab a microphone. Miguel, maybe you can join in on that as well.
I mean, very, very briefly, I would say like this, is that the way that the teams were working through the knowledge management and bringing that back into, if you want, the what works approach, and then collaborating with the potential applicants and really helping them through, if you want, into really getting the best possible support in order to drive that agenda, I think was part of the key of OA1 in the way that it worked. And therefore, there was a real high quality, very few, I would say, iffy situations, but really high quality, if you want, propositions that made that change possible. So I would think that that really was essential in the way that the facility was working. Very demand-driven, very much understanding, but also driving that agenda in a way that was really collaborative.
Right. Anthony.
I'd just like to add that with respect to the mobilization of resources and establishing priorities, as an intra-ACP program, of course, we tried to ensure that there was impact across Africa, Caribbean, and the Pacific regions. And I can recall a very early steering committee when we could see that the take-up in the Pacific region was a bit low. And then during that steering committee meeting, what we requested was that, a bit extra resources be put towards finding projects in the Pacific region, and the PMU responded positively towards that, and they were able to do some projects in the Pacific, which we are really grateful for.
Annemieke, I mean, I suppose there's no one-size-fits-all, and flexibility, as Anthony is kind of indicating, is key. I mean, was that something you saw throughout this?
The flexibility, yes, and for me a good example, and it relates a little bit to what has been said here, is I remember, I think it was more than 1 year ago, 1.5 years ago, I attended a steering committee. And in that committee, a review was done on women economic empowerment, and it was said, "Oh, we're falling behind. It's such a big part of the program, and we see it as an add-on. This needs to change." Everybody in the room said it needs to change. There was nobody saying no, and in a consortium, when you work together normally, and it was said, I think, by you, that these steering committees work well, and it changed. So now it is really part of the DNA of ICR Facility. There is not one project being done without women economic empowerment being really part of it. So that is something that became for me a success factor, that when something is lagging behind or there are challenges, and there are always challenges, it's put on the table, it's discussed, and shoulders are put under it from the whole consortium. So that, I think, is showing the flexibility. Yeah.
Alexandra, yeah, can I bring you in again, as you were the first person to bring up the phrase flexibility?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I can tell you that I was involved in the beginning of the ICR preparation, and then I left and I just rejoined the team last year. And I do remember that in the beginning, when the design phase was there, we were also putting a lot of effort into thinking about, okay, so we have 4 organizations, so if the requests come in, how do we make sure, how do we divide them, who does what, and all of that. And we had this whole elaborate, it sounds a little colonial, to be honest, like this list of who does which kind of ACP countries and regions and all of that. And at the end, when I came and rejoined the ICR facility, one of the first questions was to Diego, who's our OA1 lead. So how did that work out? And he was like, natural, it was kind of it's a conversation, like via conversation. And I think that that's kind of one of the key points of the ICR facility. I think it's very important to think about all of these kind of things and make sure that you have a plan, but then the basis of all of it is trust and also the flexibility to adapt. And I think that's what worked very well. And so I think that it was very interesting to see that after, thinking how on paper, like Miguel said earlier, you can think a lot of things and put them on paper, but then how do you put it into reality? And I think that worked very well. Yeah.
Miguel, you grab the microphone. We're going to add something.
Two quick things. Just to say, not everything. I mean, I like to praise ICR, but let me say something. Maybe it's not. You were talking about challenges, and the team suffered a bit my last year and a half on this, because I do think there was a challenge always in ICR, which is what was the strategic narrative of the facility. Because the fact that we were demand-driven meant that we did all kinds of things, all of them really interesting, all of them impactful, but also very different things, from supporting very small private sector organizations to large policy discussions. And to build the narrative of, I mean, and I suffered that in my own organization when they were asking me at management level, okay, explain to me ICR in a phrase. Sometimes it was difficult to explain what was like the goal. You know, I could say it's demand-driven, it's a collaborative effort, but that doesn't resonate so much when we're talking about kind of an institutional strategic narrative, no? And I think in ICR, and the team did a great effort in trying to build this, and we did build some papers, but I always felt that was maybe one of the missing pieces of the facility, how we can combine the fact that we're working from a demand perspective with the fact that we have to also create a narrative of what is the overall objective that we are collectively trying to achieve beyond supporting business environment, which is too vague, no? And the other thing, because probably this is my last intervention, I guess, the other thing I'm
going to ask everyone for a quick takeaway.
Oh, then I'll
yeah. All right. In that case, we'll start down the end. Annemieke, just if to encapsulate in a minute or so what you would like people to think about today, what you'd like them to talk about today, what's your message?
And I think it bridges well with the last remarks on the narrative. At S&V, we aim to work at system transformation, working at enabling environment. What ICR Facility is doing is part of that. And how do you do that with these sometimes isolated activities? So that is something to reflect today. How, because we do contribute to it with this project, how can that be made stronger? I don't know if.
Yep, absolutely. Elena next. We'll go down the line.
Will improvise. I think a big takeaway is for me that really living this Team Europe spirit is really something that is not only successful but really enriching. As we were talking about strength and weaknesses and also going beyond agency focus, I think that's something we really learned a lot from the last 5 years. And I think that's also something we will now learn again in the upcoming 4 years in this new project that will arrive. And I think that's something that is really rich and for all of us a great learning and lessons learned that we can also take into good practices now, hopefully.
Yeah, thanks very much. I think one of the most important points for me is really the human factor and making sure that you have also this possibility of getting to know each other and build trust. Miguel, you mentioned the first team leader. I think she would have liked to be here. We invited her, but unfortunately, because of family reasons, she can't. Else, we would have also given her a little present, not only to you. I will pass it on, and you have to open it and show it to everyone. Yeah, and it's. I was actually expecting you to bring up that you're the founding father. Of course, you're too humble to do so. So now you can put that on your. You can put it on your. Yeah, because I think that one of the things is also having trust from your donors and having also this possibility to kind of do your work and then show it, but also have this upfront trust to be able to implement something like the ICR facility. So thanks very much also to Miguel and the rest of the donors for that.
Christophe, your thoughts?
Very quickly, yes. And Marijke and Irene, they know it particularly because this is something that I've been talking about quite a lot about, if you want, the impact and also what you do with all the good stuff that has happened in the ICR. I mean, the one thing that I was always asking was, OA1 is about these interventions, as you said, very broad. Some, yield good results. Some yield real potential for further, if you want, engagement. So the question always was, how do we then get the private sector, either through OA2 or through other factors, to continue that work and to take it that next level? So that was always a question about, the limitations of the facility. But at the same time, I do think that one of the things that we should perhaps reflect on is we have a lot of knowledge of all these outputs from some really excellent initiatives. So how do they, rather than just saying how is it supported by more donor funding, but how they organically kind of are enabled to develop by bringing in private sector in that dialogue about some of those really, really outstanding potentials. So that was kind of a general point that I wanted to raise. But again, I think we're harsh on the facility as well. With what it had to do, it really did a great, great job. And you're right, the overarching narrative is something which is difficult to pinpoint on that kind of a facility, which at the beginning was very open-ended. And as it was zeroing in on women economic empowerment, you could say, well, actually it is providing the conditions for women economic empowerment, from policy to regulatory to access to finance, etc. So you could actually zero in on that. And I think that's part of the success of the ICR. It found its soul through that, to that approach.
Yep.
Thank you. I would like to speak about or to mention the importance of being responsive. So responsiveness, I think, is very, very important. Flexibility. Also, communication and visibility. Yeah. So very, very early, the ICR facility created its website, created its LinkedIn page, created the newsletter, and created like so many excellent webinars. So I think particularly with respect to output OA3, peer learning, best practice sharing, so many reports we received that were done by excellent analysts and then were sent to the ACP and the different partners for confirmation, and then would appear in a webinar. And we are actually able to ask or to suggest to other PSD program implementers that they join these webinars as well. So I think in terms of the peer learning that was done, this has been excellent, and the communication visibility is very important.
Well, for me, in a moment where funding is being cut, when there is a lot of discussions about, what's the role of development cooperation, when we need to be by default creative and innovative on how we face this new era by continue providing support to our partner countries, but with potentially less resources and more challenges, I think the model of ICR needs to be seen as a way forward. I think that ICR is not only about bringing together, is that from an impact perspective, it's the best way that we can work collectively. And not sure if that will happen, but that would be my wish, that in 5-10 years, this is seen as a model that has really created a change in the way we collectively work together. And I think we need to look at it from that perspective, because the alternative is not very prosperous, let's put it this way. But before I conclude, I want to say something. I want to really, honestly, from the bottom of my heart, thank the whole team. I mean, I can remember hundreds of times where each of them dedicated hours. I remember receiving emails from all of them at 11, 10 at night, and I was talking to the different team leaders like, we need to do something about it, because the level of commitment that all of them had. And specifically, I was thinking all the panel about Jasmine, about a time where we were discussing with ACP how we can support Haiti in a moment where it was very complicated. And Jasmine just keep on going and going, trying to find a way to work with them until finally we couldn't, but it was not for lack of trying. So I think I like to praise the whole team about this. I think it was about the structures, the donors, the implementers, but it was mostly about them, about how they look at this and how they did it. So thank you to all of them.
Well, cheers to that. Here, got your mug. Thank you very much. That's a great place to end this opening panel. But of course, lots more discussion to come, and we'll hear from everyone and network throughout the day. But give us another round of applause, please, for our speakers.